Okay, Moses, can you see the slides to go ahead and start?
Yeah.
It's all yours. Moses, go ahead. Oh, there we go. Go ahead.
No, let me introduce you before we go to learning objectives. Yeah, thanks. Should I start or?
Yes, please start.
Okay. Good evening and welcome from me, Nigeria. I want to thank you all for being on this workshop at this time. We are going to review what Dr. Morocco said last time. She started with a very beautiful introduction of what this African walkthrough is all about. She introduced us to the series and what is expected of us. She also told us about the tab 21, about the competencies we need as addiction professionals. And she also told us the things that we need to do, the expectations, and we have a journal to be able to jot down 1 or 2 things that will be of interest to us. And today, those introductions and some of the rules, we set out last time still subsist today. For instance, we are not going to be asking questions to interrupt the flow of the discussions, except if it's absolutely necessary, then the administrator, will interrupt the presentation. And but if you have a question, you can write it, on the chat, and then she will read it, and then at the end of the presentation, we can go ahead and ask those questions. Today, we are going to talk about the physiology and pharmacology, for addiction professionals, specifically Module 2, which deals with introduction to psychoactive substances. This module actually focuses on what psychoactive substances are, and what are the main categories of psychoactive substances, the 4 major classes, how these substances are administered, and what is the typical pattern or progression from the initial use of these substances to addiction. The learning objectives for these modules are, first of all, by the end of the presentation, it is expected that we'll be able to answer the following questions. Define what psychoactive substance is, and we'll be able to list general ways in which psychoactive substances affect our mood, our thoughts, and our behavior. We'll also be able to list the 4 main categories or classes of psychoactive substances and several substances within each. We'll be able to list the methods of administering psychoactive substances and discuss the levels of progression of substance use, as I said, from the initial use to addiction. I recall last time, Dr. Morocco gave us some definition of terms, and one of those was psychoactive substance. So what are psychoactive substances? Psychoactive substance affect the body's central nervous system. We have the body's central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. But we also have a peripheral nervous system. But here we are focusing mainly on the brain and the spinal cord, which make up the central nervous system. And then this change the act of the brain and the spinal cord to change how people behave or perceive what is happening around them. These substances actually can be illicit. For instance, in my own environment, cigarette is a psychoactive substance, it's a illicit substance. Alcohol in many places is illicit because you can take it and no law regulating or banning the use of alcohol. But substances like heroin, cocaine, and cannabis in my own country are still, illicit substances. And they actually act on the brain and other parts of the body. And we know that there are some other substances too that act on the brain and the spinal cord. And this involves even medication which we use on a daily basis. For instance, some prescription drugs like tramadol, petidine, and the rest are also used, but they also act on the central nervous system and have addictive potential. And that's why when you're prescribing them, you have to be very careful about the dosage and then the duration of use. And similarly, some psychotropic drugs that we use, like antipsychotics or even antidepressant drugs, are drugs that also act on the central nervous system, but they don't have the addictive potential of psychoactive substances because they don't induce, these pleasurable effects that individuals who abuse substances, derive from using the substances. So, but there are substances that we use that don't actually act on the central nervous system. So as I said, it consists of the brain and the spinal cord. And you can see it here. And the brain also has what we call the blood-brain barrier, which is made up of layers of cells or who form a tissue, the barrier that protects the brain from all forms of substances. And large water-soluble substances or molecules are blocked because they are large, they dissolve in liquids, and then they don't penetrate the blood-brain barrier. So they don't tend to act on the central nervous system. And that means that they will not qualify for psychoactive substance. Water is not a psychoactive substance. You drink it, but it's not, a psychoactive substance as such. Then, on the other hand, we have small but fast-soluble molecules that can enter, penetrate the blood-brain barrier and act on the central nervous system. And we know that we take all sorts of medication and all sorts of drugs, but not all of them actually cross the blood-brain barrier. Aspirin, for instance, and some of the antibiotics we use don't get to cross the blood-brain barrier, but some antibiotics, for instance, chlorphenicol, can cross the blood-brain barrier, but they are not psychoactive as such. So this blood-brain barrier has a way of protecting the brain from the effects of all kinds of substances. So mainly fast-soluble, small molecular, well-structured, penetrate the blood-brain barrier, and this is where you find more of the psychoactive substances. Most of them are of small molecular weight. They dissolve in fat, and then they can easily act on the brain and central nervous system, thereby, exerting the effects that the users actually derive. Then we go to pharmacology. What is pharmacology? Pharmacology is a branch of medicine that studies the effects of medication and other substances on the body and the brain. And as we said earlier, based on a definition, for a substance to be qualified as a psychoactive substance, it has to act on the central nervous system. But when these substances, penetrate the brain, they actually act on the brain and the body. They affect the brain and the body, and the body metabolizes these substances and breaks them down so that they can be eliminated. Because most substances that are taken into the body are recognized by the body as foreign bodies. So the body now goes into action to break them down and into smaller bits, and then after it metabolizes them, it now disposes of them through the process of excretion. And the main organ which serves out these metabolic activities in the brain is the liver. So if the liver is functional, is intact, it tends to break most of the substances that are ingested. But the kidneys too can also start to excrete some of these, break down some of these substances in the body. And then when you take them, they're eliminated in various ways, maybe through, mainly through the urine or feces, sometimes, through our breath, sweat, and so on. So, and the metabolism also depends on the type of substance and the duration and how long the person has been taking the substance. And we find that there are many things that affect the metabolism of a substance once it is taken into the body, of a user. Then we come to the concept of half-life. I know these are very basic definitions for most of us. I know we have senior people here, and we have professors, we have psychiatrists. This knowledge is very basic, but to some of us, it may be something that we're not very much conversant with. And since this is a multidisciplinary walkthrough, we have to make do with it and see how we can work together. That is the essence. Half-life. What is half-life? Half-life simply means the amount of time it takes to eliminate half the original dose of a substance from the body. If you take, for instance, 1 gram of an antibiotic, and then you want to know how long it takes for the body to eliminate 500 milligrams, of the substance. So that would be the half-life. And the half-life depends on so many factors. It depends on the type of substance taken in. It depends on how regular the person has been using the substance and also the amount. And we know that the rate of metabolism tends to slow down with age. Children and the elderly usually are not fast metabolizers. And that's why, for those of us who are clinicians, if you're prescribing drugs, you usually take the age and the weight into consideration, because these things actually affect how a drug is metabolized. But that assumes that you have an intact liver that's functioning well. If the major organ of metabolism, for instance, the liver or the kidney, is diseased, then you have to adjust your dosage. And sometimes you have to avoid completely some of the medicines because it will be very injurious to the person using the substance. So what are these factors? As I said earlier on, a person's age. Children and the elderly don't metabolize fast. The length of time a person uses the drug and how regular the substance is used, the amount of substance regularly used, all affect the body and affect the way the body absorbs psychoactive substances, metabolizes them, and eliminates them. Because if you take a drug regularly in large amounts, the body tends to build up enzymes to be able to deal with the load of what you are putting into it. So you find that a lot of enzymes will now begin to break, they build up so that they'll be able to metabolize and break these substances into components. If you eat food, of course, the food you eat is converted into the energy you need for life, for your thinking processes, or for whatever physical activity you need to do. So you need all those things to to help you to be able to function well. But you find that people who use some substance, for instance, those who are alcoholics, you find that even the absorptive surface might be flattened, might not be very good. And when you take a substance or you take even medication, they are not properly absorbed. And for those of them who take alcohol, you find that they induce a lot of metabolism, and some substances that have similar structures or act a similar way, to alcohol and metabolize faster. A person who's alcoholic, for instance, and has a good functioning liver, if you give him, for instance, sleeping drugs like benzodiazepine, you find that they burn them faster. And you find that you may need a higher dose to be able to have the same effect that an ordinary person who has not been using alcohol would take. So these are factors that affect our metabolism, and so also the elimination. If the kidney is diseased, the rate of elimination is impaired. So, so these are actually factors that affect the rate of metabolism in the body, and you have to take that into consideration. And for some people, they may come with overdosage because of a diseased liver, or the kidneys are not able to cope, and then the toxins build up in the body. So psychoactive substances, what are they? Recall that when Morocco introduced the topic, you had definition of what psychoactive substances are, and we say that they act with brain and the central nervous system. But we want to go further this time. Psychoactive substances alter the mood, the thought or thinking process, sensory perceptions, and the behavior of the user. At this point, I really want us to pause and think about how psychoactive substances will affect mood, thoughts, sensory perceptions, and behavior. In fact, I have divided us into regions. I want those from the North Africa region to think about, just maybe a minute or two, to think about how psychoactive substances might affect our mood. And then I want those from South Africa to help us think about how these substances might affect our thoughts or our thinking processes. And I want also responses from those of us from East Africa and Central Africa to think about ways in which sensory perceptions are affected by psychoactive substances. And finally, my colleagues from West Africa, I want you to think about how psychoactive substances might affect one's behavior. Maybe you might have experienced it personally, or you would have seen it from your patients, or you would have heard stories about those who use psychoactive substances and how they behave. So I give 1 or 2 minutes, and then I get some responses from the various regions. I said again, those from North Africa, I want you to tell us about how psychoactive substances affect the mood. And those from South Africa will tell us about thoughts, processes, or the thinking process, and then sensory perception, those from East Africa and Central Africa, and then West Africa, how psychoactive substances affect behavior. So 2 minutes, please. I want to get responses, and maybe you answer through your chat, and the administrator will help me get the responses, the various responses from the participants. Thank you. We have a minute more to think about how these substances affect the different aspects of our life, mood, thoughts, sensory perception, and behavior. So when you are through, I want to get some responses before we continue.
Dr. Moses, they're writing them in the chat. Shall I read them out loud, or do you want people to unmute?
Yes, please. Yes, okay, please. I don't mind. That will be fine.
So we have psychoactive substances affects behavior where a user exhibits some irrational behaviors like violence, anger, etc.
Yeah.
It could make a user hyperactive.
Yeah.
Alteration in interpersonal relationships. Sensory perceptions may be affected, and patients may develop hallucinations or illusions. Another one says racing thoughts or delusional thinking. Aggression, irritability, anger, suspiciousness, auditory and visual hallucinations. Some substances which fall under the group of hallucinogens could cause sensory distortions. Sounds can become more vivid, colors more bright. Violence, withdrawn state. Oops, I almost lost it. Increase in disinhibitions, sexual recklessness. Affects concentration and memory. Oh, now they're coming in so fast I can't keep up. Stimulants make someone elated and euphoric. For behavior, increased or reduced activities depending on the drug. Violence, increased risky behavior. Another one for behavior, aggression, disrespect.
Yes, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your very good responses. Really, you know that individuals who use psychoactive substances, really there are some benefits from them. And there might be, and you find that the reaction or the effects can either be positive or negative. They derive some pleasure from using these substances. And it may be lifting their mood, or it may make them, to think faster or be more alert, or may make them, to sit up and to be able to accomplish tasks in good time. So everyone, has their own reason for using psychoactive substances, and that's why it is nice for us to really get to know why they take them, and then we'll be able to know, how we help them if we come to intervention, because it can either be positive or negative. Just yesterday, I was talking to one of my clients who has a lot of problems, using cannabis, and usually goes psychotic. He says, I only get to become myself when I use psychoactive substance cannabis. If I don't take it, I'm not myself. Dr. Moses, you are seeing my real me. That was the answer. So I said, okay, thank you very much. We'll get to talk about it later. So people have reasons for using them. Thank you. So as I said, the effects can be both positive or negative, and they depend to a large extent on the type of substance used. Yes, some substance, as we get to know from Beatrice, what she presents, the different classes, some of them can make them alert, some of them can depress, and some of them can make them, hallucinate, and so on and so forth. But beyond the type of substance, it also depends on individual vulnerability, and also what the individual expects, before using the substance. So different people will take the same substance, but you find that the effects are varied based on some of these features, whether it is the type of substance, or their personality, or the amount of substance they're using, or even the integrity of their body organs that metabolize some of these substances. So the effects vary from one individual to the other. So I think this is the bit I have to present today, and I know it's very basic, but if there are questions, I want to take them before Beatrice comes on board. Thank you.
No questions, unless you want to give people a moment to type in new questions, but there are no questions so far.
They have 2 or 3 minutes to ask questions in case they need to ask. But if not, then we have a short break and the Beatrice can take over.
Hello, I have a question.
Okay.
Yes. Could it also depend on the region where some of these substances are manufactured, or the way they have been stored, or the route of administration?
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Maybe the administrator can read the question to me.
I was just looking at the effect from the substances. Could depend on the region, maybe where this substance has been manufactured from, of administration, or maybe other factors like reality.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you well, but the bit I heard, I think yes, you are right. Even the route of administration and some other things also can affect the way the substances affect the individual. But if you could type out the question so that the administrator could read it out to me, that will be fine.
Okay, that's fine.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Sometimes like insomnia.
Pardon?
Some differences like insomnia, that inability to sleep. Sometimes called for use of psychoactive to induce sleep. And in view of the effect of this on the human body, one can avoid that.
Well, yes, people have, sleep disturbance or insomnia is just a symptom of a disorder, and the brain has a narrow range which it expresses itself. So you find that the symptoms overlap from one disorder or from one substance to the other. And insomnia, you find that insomnia occurs across many substances and also other disorders. But if somebody is using a benzodiazepine or a hypnosedative to make him sleep, yes, the first thing you need to do, as you get to know in the course of our workshop walkthrough, you have to assess and find out why is the person insomniac. Why is the person unable to sleep? Is it because of his age? Is it because of the environmental noise? Or is it because of a disease in his system? Or is it because of the substance that the person is using? So it's only after that that you get to know, then you now see how you can go about treating the patient. And the modality of treatment may involve gradual withdrawal of the substance, or you substitute, and then also do some counseling, and then augment with some exercises, relaxation exercises. So many things you can do, but that is beyond the scope of this topic for now. But in due course, you will get to know what we can do in such a circumstance.
Sorry.
So I think this is the question that you already answered, but people had asked, can the effect be affected by the region where the substance is manufactured from, or how it has been stored, or the route of administration?
Yes, for instance, if we talk about weed or marijuana or cannabis, it's discovered that the active ingredient, the two most important ingredients, the THC and the CBD, you find that the ratio of THC to CBD varies from region to region. And we know that studies have shown that the THC concentration in Nigeria is higher in West Africa than some parts of the world. So you might take it maybe in Europe and you don't find a lot of the adverse or negative effects. But if you take the one in Nigeria, you find out we have a lot of problems with people who use them. And we keep having this argument with the class, keep arguing this is a God-given grass, they call it grass. God has given us to make us happy. We use psychiatrists and addiction professionals want to make us miserable. You want to take this out of us. so on and so forth. But we tell them that, yes, you might feel happy, but there's something that is taken away from you. So the environment varies. And even in the same environment, it depends on whether you grow it indoors or outdoors, but sometimes they are adulterated. In the process of producing these substances, there might be some contaminants. And some deliberately, for instance, in Nigeria, we have people who use cannabis, but they don't only use cannabis. But when you test them, you find that the cannabis was laced with some amphetamine or even cocaine, but they never knew. All they knew was that they were buying marijuana, but they come with so many negative consequences. It's only the test that shown that that marijuana they were using is actually contaminated or laced with either some amphetamine or even cocaine in it. So that is very correct.
So I think there are some comments going on, and I think we should go ahead and type questions if you have more, but we'll save them to the end, and we'll turn this over to Beatrice now. Thanks, Moses.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Moses. I wish to request that we mute our mics so that we can improve audibility. Thank you very much. So I wish to build on what Moses has actually covered. He said the effect of psychoactive substances can actually depend on many factors. And to some of you, because you have already asked questions that can depend on the type of drug, can it depend on the routes of administration? That's indeed what we're going to cover next. So we're going to look at the classification of these psychoactive substances. We are then going to look at the routes of administration, including the speeds of action. And finally, we shall look at the progression of use. So thinking about the classification of psychoactive substances, we have got 4 major classifications. You may discover that some literature may have more than this or less than this, but for purposes of this course, we have 4 classifications or 4 classes. The first one is what we call stimulants. Like some people like to say, stimulant does just what the name suggests. It stimulates. Some people call them uppers in the sense that they elevate, the activity of the central nervous system. And we have a couple of examples under that categorization or that class. We have got examples like cocaine. We have examples like amphetamine. We have examples like methamphetamine. We also have our most, commonly used drugs, nicotine and caffeine, which some of us might just be sipping right now where we are. There are also examples of stimulants. And you might want to think about your country and examples of other drugs that fit in the category of stimulants because they excite the central nervous system, they cause elation or elevation of activities of the brain and the central nervous system generally, including you will find the breathing increases, you find the blood pressure rises. All these are examples of what stimulants can do. And I think for us it's important that we figure out the different names of drugs that people use in our countries and our regions, because they may be using cocaine under a different name, but the effect will actually be stimulating. So that's homework for us. The second category of drugs is what we call opioids. Opioids are sometimes referred to as narcotics. Basically, these are drugs that are actually used as analgesics or pain relievers, but they also cause sleep or sedation. And we have good examples, I think, which we are familiar with, like heroin, we have morphine, we have opium, we have Demerol, and many others, which again, from your different regions, you will be able to add to this list. And I always remind us to think about the street names, because sometimes you may look for a drug that's in this category and not think it's in your country, but is actually there under a different name, a street name most likely. The third category is what we call depressants. And just like the name suggests, again, they depress the activities of the central nervous system. So they would probably do the reverse of what stimulants do. Some people call them downers because of that effect. And the good examples have been given, very famous substance there, alcohol, that is loved by many cultures and many regions. We have got barbiturates, we've got benzodiazepines, which are used a lot by people in the medical profession. We've got gamma, and I pick Rohypnol there because I have recently seen a lot of its use in my country as a death rape drug. and they're sometimes given a name called rice. And so people don't know what, when you talk about rice, you're actually talking about a serious depressant of the central nervous system. So again, let's figure out what are some of these drugs in our regions. And the fourth category is what we call hallucinogens. Like the name suggests, these are drugs that alter sensory perceptions. And therefore, I like an example I saw someone type in the chat. I think it was from West Africa, where you were talking about behavior and or one of the other regions, and someone said that we have drugs that make people make sounds more vivid, and they make lights more acute and sharp. These are actually hallucinogens. They distort the sensory perceptions. And so sometimes I have had clients who say that they had, I'm talking about hearing, they had light and they saw sound, very interesting things, that things are extremely articulated in the sensory perceptions. Examples are LSD, mescaline, ecstasy, mushrooms. And indeed, we can think about our regions and think that's our homework, to go and find out all the different types of drugs that we have and see how we can classify them under these different classes and bring in more examples, because the purpose of this classification is to give us an idea of the kind of manifestations of signs and symptoms that we may see with our clients when they present themselves to us, and to also understand some of the withdrawal presentations our clients will come to us with, based on the kind of substances that they use. And when you look at your trainer manual, which we're going to give you at the end of this course, you're going to see further details about this classification. It's important for you to note that alcohol, nicotine, and caffeine have been highlighted in red. This is because these are drugs that are actually legal in virtually all communities, many cultures actually. Let me not say all, because I know in the Middle East, alcohol is strictly forbidden, but I do know that in many countries and regions, perhaps in Africa, you will find these three are actually encouraged, sometimes celebrated. And what we want to say in the next slide is that just because they are legal does not mean they are harmless. So it's important to note that just because a substance is legal in your country or in my country doesn't mean it's any safer than the illegal substances. In fact, in our country, Kenya, one of the drugs that has caused the largest and the biggest impact and havoc is actually alcohol, whether it is, health, economic, until our president, our former president, when he became president, he actually declared that people must stop drinking alcohol and become a working nation, because you have communities where people stop working and all they do is wake up and go to drink. So just because a substance is legal doesn't mean it's safer. In fact, the legality of a substance might be dependent on factors like the politics of a country. It might depend on religious, considerations of a country. It might depend on the cultural traditions and norms. So all these are things that we want to think about. But keep in mind that just because it's legal doesn't mean it's safe. And this is good for us in terms of our prevention messages. Now, I'm sure you have observed some drugs that were missing in the table that was presented. A drug like cannabis, which is common, one of the reasons we haven't put it in any of the classifications is because it can actually have mixed effects. For some people, they may take it for relaxation, but it has also been found to cause some hallucinogenic effects, especially when taken in large quantities. That's why it doesn't fit perfectly in any one of them. A substance like cat, which is grown a lot in my country, it's called sometimes for stimulation, and it can cause mild euphoria, but it has also been found that in excess doses, it can present people, or it can cause people to present with even manic episodes and hyperactivity. Now, dissociative anesthetics can cause, sedation, but can also cause hallucinogenic effects. Inhalants, basically taken for sedation by many people, especially street children, but they've also been found to present with hallucinogenic effects among some people. And that's why you notice they were probably not in the classification because of that. Okay, the next thing we will talk about, and which Moses has already alluded to, is that sometimes the effect of drugs depend on the routes of administration indeed. And so this is the different examples of routes of administration. We have got swallowing, which I think we are familiar with. We just put it in our mouth and swallow, like the name suggests. Then we have got what is called snorting. I believe snorting is where you put it in, you take advantage of the nasal, the nasal membranes. And one of the things that used to be taken in our country traditionally was called through the nose. Then we have got smoking, which I think we are familiar with. A lot of, tobacco products are smoked. We have got inhaling. We see this a lot with inhalants like the glue that is commonly used by street children. We have got intramuscular injection, which is an injection deep into the muscle. We also have subcutaneous injection, which is just on the below the surface of the skin. Then we have got intravenous injection, which is in the veins. We have got topical, where you apply on the skin like a patch, like some of the tobacco patches that we have. And we have got sublingual, which is placed under the tongue. So again, these are methods that you will find your clients using to consume substances. And like Moses said, the route of administration can actually determine the effect, because some of the methods deliver the drug to the brain and the central nervous system pretty fast, like we're going to see in the next slide.
Beatrice, before you go to the next slide, there was a question about inhalants, like
yes,
like glue, and what category would those fall into in terms of hallucinogens or other of the 4 categories that you had. Do you know, like glue?
Say that again, Kim.
So the question here, I'll just read it because it says, what class are the glue, glue that people sniff, or fuels when the kids are sniffing gasoline? Do you know what class of drugs those are?
Okay, thank you. So we said that inhalants have primarily sedating effects, and also have hallucinogenic effects. So if we were to force them into some category, probably they would fall closer in the depressant category. Thank you. So back to administration, we are saying that the faster the drug hits the brain, the greater and more reinforcing its effect will be. And that's what Moses was talking about, that indeed the route does have an impact on the effect of a drug. And next, we are going to look at the difference, some samples of methods of use and how quickly the drug reaches the brain. So they are called speeds of action. Smoking, for example, has been identified as the one that has got the fastest speed of action, because it takes about 7 to 10 seconds to reach the brain. We have got the intravenous drugs, which take about 15 to 30 seconds. We have got injection into the muscle or under the skin, which takes about 3 to 5 minutes. We have got the mucous membrane absorption, where we have snorting and sometimes rectal. And I know sometimes people are also using vaginal methods. I have seen that in my country. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes. We have got swallowing, which takes about 20 to 30 minutes. And then, of course, we have got the absorption from the skin, which we were talking about, examples of the patches, which is actually much lower, and it takes a longer period. So depending on what method your client is using, the effect of the drug will actually be different. And I know we get concerned when we hear someone is injecting IV because of the quickness with which the substance can get into the brain. We have also seen that smoking can also deliver substances very quickly. And I know that we have seen some people who smoke a substance and immediately become hazy and become dizzy and become sedated because of the fastness with which that substance reaches the brain. So that is important for us to keep in mind. So now here comes a little exercise. I know we are supposed to form small groups, and when you're training in your countries and you have face-to-face meetings, please do form the small groups. If you're training online and you have enough time, you're not doing a walkthrough, there is also a method of forming small groups, just that it takes time. That's why we are not using it here. So for now, what I'd like to request is that I want you to go to the chat, and I want you to just list any 3 psychoactive substances that are found in your region. And please, for each of them, list the common routes of administration. And do keep in mind that some substances have more than one route of administration. So go to your chart, you can indicate your region, and then you tell us what kind of any 3 psychoactive substances and the key methods of administration that are used. And I know Kim is going to be checking for me what you're saying, and she will be reading out. So we have 2 minutes to do that small activity. Please start. Actually, maybe Kim, I can access them and I can actually be able to read.
Okay.
So thank you. I noticed that someone here says that alcohol is taken in their region orally, cannabis is smoked. South Africa, cannabis is smoked. Someone says cannabis is taken orally or inhaled in their region. Okay, intravenously in their region, cannabis is used orally. In Nigeria, cannabis or weed or gaja smoked or oral, cocaine snorted, sniffed. West Africa, cocaine smoked, snorted and inhaled, alcohol orally. East Africa, alcohol, oral cannabis smoked, cannabis smoked and oral. There is also cannabis smoked. I can see alcohol oral, cigarettes smoked. I can see West Africa, cannabis oral or smoked. I can see alcohol orally or cocaine snorted. South Africa, I can see methamphetamine is smoked. I can see Tanzania, injection of heroin. I can see cannabis smoked. I can see alcohol vaginally used using tampons in Eastern Africa. I can see alcohol orally used in Nigeria. Thank you very much. Great. I think we are sharing a lot in terms of commonalities of how these substances are being used across the regions, but we are also picking very unique methods in some of the regions. And I think the key thing is, let's get familiar with how people in our regions are using substances, because like we always know, especially young people get smarter every day. If they think that they're in an institution and they're going to be arrested for smoking cannabis because it's an illegal substance in a country, I have seen that in my institution, they decide to cook it and bake it in cookies and biscuits and so on and so forth. And therefore, we need to understand these dynamics so that we don't miss out on our clients, because we are looking for the traditional methods of use of these substances. So thank you very much for your input. So we shall continue. There is no break, of course. So finally, we are going to look at progression of use. And I also remember Moses mentioned this, that clients don't become, addicted to substances overnight. It's a process. And this process begins with very basic, contact with drugs, what we call experimentation. And this is common, especially among young people in schools. You find your friend is smoking and you also decide to try it. That's experimentation. Or there is a party and someone offers you, to taste or to try. And I have seen this in my university where students are invited for parties, birthday parties, and then they are given these little cakes and they wonder why they're being given a little small cake, only to later learn that that small piece of cake was actually a cannabis cake. So these are recreational uses, they are occasional. As the client progresses, they could then move beyond just that initial experimental use and begin to use occasionally. So maybe each time there is a party, they use a substance. Or it could be circumstantial. Circumstantial means they discovered when they used the substance, it made them relax and it was just before an exam. So now they decide every time before an exam, they're going to try and use the substance to deal with the circumstances of exam anxiety. So that can also be, the next stage. In the third stage, we have what is called intensified or regular use. Really, here we are saying the client is using more often. You can almost see a pattern. I see this in universities again. In my university, it's actually Friday. So Friday is a day when they go to hang out. And so there are those who every single Friday will be hanging out in the student center where alcohol, for example, is sold. And so you find a person who began with just an experimental use, then realize it helps them with exams, began using once in a while just before exams, but then now became a regular visitor in the student club. And so now they are a regular user. You can almost pick the pattern that every Friday they will be there, that every Monday they'll be struggling to attend a lecture. In other universities, it's a Thursday. I know I taught in a university where Thursday was the day they hung out, so Friday, half the class was not present. So this is actually what we are calling the third stage of intensified use and regular use. And at this stage, the substance begins to cause the client some problems. You might actually begin to realize they're having difficulties in class or attending class if they're students. You might discover they're having trouble going to work if they're working. The family may begin to see some negligence of responsibilities. So here we begin to see some level of what we would call abuse. In the final stage, where we are talking about compulsive abuse, so much in terms of how often it's done and how much is being consumed because of what we are going to be told later, called tolerance, where now the body can accommodate the substance and adjust itself in terms of metabolism and elimination. So the person needs more and more of the substance. So eventually now, they are no longer taking the drug for fun. The body actually needs that drug for survival. So if they don't use the drug, they probably start having withdrawal symptoms. Now, some of them, all their life now becomes, centered around the substance. All the other activities become neglected in favor of the substance. And so the person is actually chasing the substance as if it were the primary, aspect of their life. And there's a lot of negligence of their key responsibilities, like we said in the definition of addiction. And of course, they have all these problems, whether it's health, socio-economic, family, occupational, educational related to the substance use, and of course physiological. So that's the progression of use. Once we will be introducing you to the trainer manual, it has much more of this. I don't know whether I want to try that, but I would like you to, when you're training this class, there is an activity that we'd like you to do. Let me just open it so that you can get to see it, so that you can use it with your class. It's called, it's an activity for, yes, this one. So what we would do if we had time, and what you will do when you train in your institutions, this is the trainer manual. You are going to ask people in groups to get into groups, into 4 groups. Each group is going to take one of these stages. And once they take the stage, they are going to read the information here about their stage, and they are going to role play. And you won't tell the other groups what they are playing. So you will tell them secretly, and each of the 4 groups will role play their stage. And then the rest of the group will try to guess what stage that person, that client in that role play has reached. So one group will role play a client who's in experimental stage. Another one will role play the occasional or circumstantial use. The other one will role play the intensified or regular use. And the final group will role play or have a skit on the addiction or the compulsive use. So the idea is you want to build an understanding of these stages in your students. So you can do that when you have an opportunity to train in your institution. So I want to stop share on that one. And I want to go back to our slides. And we're going to see some little for us to do here, which is more of an activity. So here is our activity. You're going to go to your chat. And because we have learned a lot today, right from what Moses started teaching us and all the way to what I have done, I want you to write one quiz question in your chat about today's material. We're not writing on a piece of paper. If you are teaching this in your institution, you would actually ask the quizzes to be written and put in a bowl, and you would shuffle them, and you would ask now people to dip their hand into the bowl and pick a question. And when they pick a question, they try and answer it. And the rest of the class will say whether their answer was correct or not correct, and you keep moving. You can even have a ball where you throw. So I pick the ball. If I throw to Kim, Kim picks the question and she tries to answer. If she's done, she throws the ball to the other participant, and you can make it fun. So this is supposed to be fun learning, actually. So please go to your chat, type in a question about today's material, and then we shall try to answer. Okay, so I'll give you 1 minute for typing in. Okay, so I want to read one question here. I'm not sure how to do this, but I want to read one question. What is the fastest route of administration for psychoactive drugs? So if you want to answer that question, what is the fastest route of administration for psychoactive drugs? Please type your answer and I will read it. Type your answer to that question. Okay, so iPhone says smoking. Is he correct? If he's correct, I want to see you clapping your hand for him like this. At least I can see you clapping. So is he correct? Okay, I see. Smoking, is it correct? Yes, it is correct. Thank you. It is, someone else said intravenous. Intravenous, we said, was the second. So it is basically smoking. Another question, which class of psychoactive substances is amphetamine? Which class of psychoactive substances is amphetamine grouped? Please type in your answer. So one person says stimulant, 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 stimulant. Is that correct? Can we give them a clap? Clap, 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 I can see. Thank you, stimulant. Another question, I'm waiting to see another question. Someone type another question. One more question. Yes, what class of psychoactive substances is cannabis? What type of psychoactive substances is cannabis? Yes, any answer? Cannabis? Yes? Aha, someone says stimulant, another one says mixed, another one says others, another one says stimulant, another one said mixed effects and explains that it has hallucinogenic and stimulating. So can we give them a clap? Because we said cannabis has mixed effects. It can actually sedate, but it can actually also cause hallucinogenic effects. So mixed effects. Thank you very much. I see you have lovely questions and lovely answers. Well done. And so finally, we will go to our final slide. Our final slide is actually a reflective exercise. And this is about just, and this is an important thing that you can do with all your courses and all your classes. Let learners, remember you were told by Moreko and Moses about the journal. The journal is where you reflect on what you've learned and how you're going to apply it in your job. And whether you have any further questions. So in another 1 minute, please type in what you have learned about today that you did not already know. Don't tell us what you already knew, what you did not already know, okay? Yes, and how you might apply it. So let's begin. 1 minute for that. Yes, one person here learned something about the fastest route. They didn't know which it was. They thought it was smoking. Another one learned that sometimes you can have vaginal administration of substances. Another one learned that cannabis has mixed effects. Another one, again, about the fastest route. They thought it was IV, the one of vaginal administration. That one seems to be very new to a lot of people, especially for alcohol and especially for girls, apparently. So you see them hazy in your class and you don't know why, and they're not smelling any drug. So it looks like the fastest routes, again, the new classification into 4 groups is a new thing for some people. Another one learned, yes, about volatile substances that can act as depressants. Another one has also come to understand how drugs alter the brain structure. So thank you very much. Those are wonderful insights you have. And I have actually come to the end of our session with Moses. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I know we've run out of time, but you can always type them and we can always respond to them on email. Thank you. Thank you. Hand it over to Kim.
I think we're all set. Yes, there were some questions that weren't answered that we should probably figure out how to get the answers to people. Email is one way. I was also thinking, and we can talk about this later, is we have that discussion group on the website, and maybe we could add everybody in this class to that group, and but we can talk about that later. So we'll let you know how we want to do that. I will send a new link tomorrow, and then I'll remind you on Monday for the next session, which is next Tuesday at the same time. So it will be at the same time from now on. We started early the last time, but every time going forward will be the same time. So I think that's it for this evening, and we'll have a good weekend, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.